ecologist is Margaret Bryan Davis. So Margaret Bryan Davis was an American paleoecology. She also specialized in the study of pollen, which I believe is called palynology, which also went really well with her paleoecology specialization because pollen is preserved in sediments for a very long time, so she could sort of go back very far in time and study very ancient pollen. She also helped to pioneer the study of climatic variation and those effects on ecosystems, especially on plant communities, particularly trees and forests. So, her background and training: she was born on October 23rd in 1931 in Boston, Massachusetts, where she grew up. She received a bachelor's in plant physiology and ecology from Radcliffe College, that was in 1953. So, that's where she was granted a Fulbright fellowship, and that allowed her to study abroad at Denmark's University of Copenhagen, and that's where she sort of got into this research of pollen. She researched pollen deposits in Greenland, and she published her first paper there, which I believe I mentioned the name of later on. She also received a PhD from Harvard in 1957, and then an honorary master's from Yale in 1974 for her postdoctoral research. And she also taught at Yale as a professor and at the University of Minnesota, where she was actually appointed the Regents Professor of Ecology in 1982. So here are some of her research and contributions. The 1963 was that first paper she wrote called On the Theory of Pollen Analysis, and that sort of revolutionized the study of the interpretation of pollen records. She sort of pioneered a new way to look at pollen. So, her research on the migration of tree species has helped in modern predictions of the effects of climate change on forests. She also studied old-growth forests and fossil pollen to trace changes in forest composition and the climatic causes of this change, which also demonstrated the fluidity of ecosystems and their constantly changing nature. This was at a time where people saw ecosystems as a lot more static than they really were. So she also made paleoecology relevant to the modern issue of climate change. She went very far back in the ecological record, looking at how climate and environment was affecting these tree species and ecosystems as a whole, and so that really helps us with the future, looking at our changing climate and how that might affect ecosystems. So these are some of the awards and honors that she received. So she was the president of the American Quaternary Association from 1978 to 1980, and then she was elected to the National Academy of Sciences in 1982. She was the president of the Ecological Society of America in 1987 up to 1988, and then she was the sixth recipient of the Nevada Medal by the Desert Research Institute, 1963. She was also the recipient of the Eminent Ecologist Award from the Ecological Society of America in 1993. I believe she was the third woman to receive that award. She was declared an honoree of National Women's History Month in 2009. She was also the recipient of a William S. Cooper Award from the Ecological Society of America in 2011, and she was declared an honorary member of the British Ecological Society in 2012. So her personal relevance, her impact, I think is important. She was very much an advocate for women in science, for women's recognition, for women getting involved. She did experience sex discrimination at the University of Michigan while she was a professor there, with very low pay, much lower than any of the other professors when she was more than qualified. The university never actually came out and admitted that that was because of her being a woman, but she still very much spoke out about that and encouraged women to get involved in science and sort of the change that needed to happen in the system for equal pay among women at the university. So also her research revolutionizing the study of past environments, their continuous change, their response to environmental fluctuations, and understanding the ecological change of the present and the future. So this is particularly relevant to modern study of human impact on ecosystems, the possible future results of anthropogenic climate change, sort of, like I said, by going and looking so far back in the climate record, the ecological record, she saw how change affected ecosystems, which really helps us in the future with how human-created change will affect ecosystems. And then her involvement in palynology and paleoecology I just found particularly interesting. And these are my sources.